Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati on Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today. There's a small group of comic creators who believe that they are going to be the savior of the comic book industry. Now, these individuals believe so much in their concept that they think that their concept will be the one that basically changes the direction of the comic book industry, which has been in a slump for the last 30 years and a decline for the last 8 to 10 years. And these individuals are so caught up in their concept for their independent comic that they believe that their book is going to be the one that reverses the entire course of the comic book industry and takes the entire industry from the decline it's currently in to becoming back to profitability and becoming a place where people will buy comics once again. Now, these individuals, for the most part, usually are caught up in the euphoria of their creation, and as they are caught up in the euphoria of their creations, many of them are living in a rose-colored reality, and that rose-colored reality has them caught up in a delusion where they think that their concept is so great that their concept will become the silver bullet that will reverse the fortunes that have put the comic book industry into decline. Now, these individuals basically have gotten so caught up in a delusion that they have their comic and they think that they're going to be a superhero who's going to save the comic book industry. This is the covert contract that these individuals are looking to establish with all of fandom. And as they're looking to establish this covert contract with all of fandom, what they're doing is trying to get all of fandom to sign on to this contract. However, this is a contract they have never stated to all of the audience out here who they are offering their comic to, and oftentimes because these people never offer that contract up to people, most people don't know anything about it until these individuals get upset about their comic not doing well or getting the audience they believe it should, and that's when we start to see these kinds of creators get upset as they're confronted with the reality that shatters their rose-colored world of the comic book industry and brings them back into the real world where publishing is a very rough business. Now, in the world of trade publishing, there are 5 million books published every year, and out of those 5 million books that are published every year, 90% of those books fail to get a large audience of any kind. And that's the harsh reality of being in the world of trade publishing, which includes comic books, and many indie creators oftentimes come into this business thinking they're going to be creating this comic that will be the silver bullet, not understanding that the way you publish books is you're really going out on faith, because not many of the books that became big hits, many of the creators never expected them to be a hit at all. Because in the case of Fantastic Four #1, this was Stan Lee and Jack Kirby basically testing out a concept to see if it would be viable to compete with DC's Justice League of America, and to their surprise, Fantastic Four #1 was a huge hit, and this was followed up by Amazing Fantasy 15, which introduced Spider-Man, which was presented in the final issue of a canceled book. And in the case of Spider-Man, again, it was a major fluke that turned into a huge success. And the Marvel age of comics primarily was based on concepts that came out of a fluke. So there was no covert contract about the books being some sort of magic silver bullet to revive the comic book industry back then. So no one comic will save the comic book industry from many of its issues. No, it didn't happen back in the 1960s when the industry was in a major slump at the point because of the comics code and people thinking that comics were promoting perversion. And to get out of this slump that started in the late 90s as people started to walk away from comics because one of the whole people getting tired of all of the gimmicks and the variants and the speculator market crashing, and two, Marvel going bankrupt due to their purchase of Heroes World to do distribution and finding out a rude awakening as related to comics and returns. No, there's not going to be a magic bullet to revive sales for any book these days or revive sales for the industry. No, it's going to be a lot of hard work for everybody to get comics back to a place where readers feel safe and comfortable about buying books. So when it comes to comics, if you want to do comics, you have to have a love for comics and a passion for comics. It's not your job to go out and try to save the comic book industry. No, your job as a creator is to go out here and make the very best books that you can. And the way you make the very best books that you can is to have your love, passion, and heart on the pages of your comic as you're telling your story. That is the thing that's going to get people interested in your comic and get them excited enough to spread the word of mouth that gets people excited for your comic and has them anticipating either picking up that book for the first time or anticipating the next issue and looking forward to picking up the next issue in your series or picking up back issues in your series. This is going to be a lot of work, and you have to understand you need to be patient about it. You're not going to save the industry with an individual book, no matter what you have been told about books like Fantastic Four #1 or Amazing Fantasy 15 or Giant Size X-Men #1. Oftentimes it took months to years for those books to start to build an audience, and it took months to years for people to discover those characters. That's what I've found as I have been working on my own SJS Direct imprint. As I've been working on my own SJS Direct imprint on books like Isis, John Haynes, and Esteem, I have found that it takes sometimes years for a book to find an audience. I mean, when I did The Temptation of John Haynes in 2011, the book did get some good reviews but got some slow sales. But the John Haynes character really did not catch on until about 2016 when I did the books The Man Who Rules the World and Bride of Dracula. It was Isis Bride of Dracula where the character really started to catch on. And then in 2018 when I did John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, that's when the character in his first solo book really started to take off in sales. And that's what happens with a character. It can take a long time for a character to catch on. It's just that the publisher has to be able to persevere and continue to look to build the audience. The same thing with the Isis character. That character was one I published way back in 2002, and I wanted to do an Isis series ever since 2002. Unfortunately, I didn't have the money to do more ISIS series books, and that character basically sat until 2012, and that character really didn't start to catch on until way later in the ISIS series with books like All That Glitters and Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, and those books were like way long back in the ISIS series. It's like that. All That Glitters, I think, was like book 18, and Cyber Goddess was like 19 or 20. So it's a long way for a book. So sometimes a character doesn't catch on very quickly, and that's what happens with a lot of characters. I mean, a lot of times when you're writing a character, the audience doesn't know who this is, and they don't know whether or not they should care about that character, especially if they're an independent published character. So if the audience doesn't know that character, many people are apprehensive about buying that character, so it can take a little bit of time for the audience to get to know a character, and in that time, it's going to take time for that character to build that word of mouth and that momentum, and you may publish that character for a long time before readers start to get into that character. That's what happens in this business all the time, but nobody talks about that whole part of the business. No, they'll talk about how this character is so popular, but they won't tell you about the years it took to make that character popular. I mean, for example, I can talk about how Wolverine basically came out in about 1973 or 1974, and he was basically a throwaway character in The Incredible Hulk 180 and 181, and I actually had those comics before I sold them, and that character again was not really known outside of being a jobber for the Hulk, and it wasn't until later in the run of X-Men that he started to become popular. It wasn't until about, I think, 77 or 78 of the 1977, 1978 that the character started to get more interesting, and it wasn't until the 80s until he became popular, and that's how it usually runs. It usually takes at least a couple of years for a character to get hot and popular, and this is something people don't want to tell you. No, they have this idea and this delusion. Some of these people who are a part of fandom, who are creators, some of these people have this delusion they are going to become the saviors of the comic book industry. They think they're going to be lauded and acclaimed for creating this character who they believe to be the magic silver bullet that will get all of the people to come back to comic shops and buy books on the regular. But that's not how this business works at all. No, when it comes to this business, it's one that is, I will repeat again, a rough one, and 90% of books fail, and most of those books that fail are by a lot of creators who thought that their book was going to be this magic silver bullet that was going to turn everything around. But what turns everything around for an entire industry that has been struggling is you're going to need a strong editorial. You're going to need a strong editorial team at the big two as related to the products they create. And you're going to need things like standards like a house style. And you're also going to need the books to all remain consistent so that when readers do discover the books, they know that everything is going to remain consistent from when they come in as their entry point, and at their entry point they can feel comfortable about picking up those books where they left off and have that comfort to know that if they go and pick up the next book, they will know everything will remain consistent as related to the character story paradigm as their transformation arc continues, and go back to the back books that in the catalog, in the backlist, to find that character's previous adventures and see that everything remains consistent. That's something I do here at SJS Direct as related to publishing the SJS Direct universe. Readers can feel safe and comfortable about knowing that they can go back to 2002's ISIS and then pick up the upcoming ISIS Dark Incubus and see that everything has remained consistent with the ISIS character, or they can go to 2011 with The Temptation of John Haynes, and they can pick up 2023's John Haynes Illuminati and know that over the past decade, everything with John Haynes has remained consistent, and know that everything with Esteem from 2013 to 2024 with Esteem Horror in the Hamptons, everything is remaining completely consistent as related to that character as she's gone through a character transformation arc from being the devilish diva to hell's aspiring angel. And it's that consistency that makes the reader feel comfortable about picking up the books, and it also makes the reader feel comfortable about going out and sharing and recommending books, because a comic publisher's job is to make sure that the reader feels comfortable about picking up the books in a catalog and make sure that those readers can easily follow any of those books and not be stressed about what people call continuity. Now, that's another video, continuity, but the whole thing is you want readers to feel like, okay, I feel safe about picking up these books, and that's what's going to create the environment that has it open for people to want to come and buy comics, and that's what everybody who is a creator wants to foster. It's not about politics on either side, the left or right wing. It's about creating an environment where readers feel comfortable, and when people are comfortable and relaxed, guess what? People want to buy more product. That's what I experienced back in the late 80s when I went out to buy comics. I mean, I would go to places like Forbidden Planet and Union Square, or Jim Hanley's Universe back when it was on 34th Street, and I could spend a good hour in either of those places because the place felt comfortable, and it was going to go meet what I would consider to be fantasy friends and as picking up these books. So that's the kind of environment every creator should be trying to foster, instead of trying to polarize people and get them as related to these battle lines of woke and not woke. I mean, because that's not what sells comics. No, what sells comics is trying to foster a relationship with the customer and give the customer a environment where they feel safe and secure, where they know that, okay, I can take my kids and share these characters with them. I can share these characters with my family. I can have these books out on a coffee table and have a conversation about them. That's what people want for their comics. And again, that's not about being a savior. And I never, as a creator, want to be a savior. No, I just want to be a person who crafts great stories and goes out and crafts stories that readers can enjoy. That is my job, and that's what drives me to put my fingers to the keyboard and go out here to write stories. And it also is the thing that makes me passionate about going out to contact comic artists to do different projects. I mean, this is why I came into comics, because it was comics that I shared with my relationship with my brother. This is how I got close to my brother, and it's also how I learned how to read. I mean, comics have been a major part of my life, and I want to share that love and passion for comics. That's what I wanted to do, and as I wanted to come into this business. But I see a lot of people, they don't really understand why people love comics, and they're not understanding it because you have people who want to be a savior, and I don't want to be a savior. I mean, I've even had one of my family members tell me that when I wrote ISIS in 2002, this could be a story that could revive the comic book industry, but that's not my job to look to revive anything. No, it's my job to tell stories that I'm passionate about and share great stories with everyone. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is now available on Lulu.com in paperback, and you can pick up your own paper copy of John Haynes at Death's Door for the same price as it was on the 2022 Kickstarter. And if you want to pick up my other digital comic, Esteem No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for just 99 cents. And if you want to pick up a paper version of that comic, you can find Esteem Blast from the Past in paperback, and in the back of it is the paper version of Esteem No Good Deed. And I'd love to share my next full SJS Direct comic with everyone, but I'm still trying to save the money to pay for it. And if you guys could head over to the Cash App or the PayPal to drop a donation, that would help me get just that much further towards making the next full SJS Direct comic. Now, if you want to pick up many of the other books on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books in the Spinsterella trilogy, or my vampire novel Eternal Night, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Samurai Goddess. The goddess next door takes on kung fu killers in this action-packed martial arts ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.